Man, I get asked about this keyboard a lot. This is the Drevo Blademaster Pro. It ran a really successful Kickstarter campaign, and it promises to be like the end-all be-all that you would ever need for a wireless keyboard in a TKL form factor. It does use Bluetooth, and it's got 2.4 gigahertz as well, so it looks like there's a lot in this package for 130 bucks. We're gonna see if it delivers the goods. Ready? Let's go. This video is brought to you by Mayflower Electronics, makers of the Mayflower Arc Gaming DAC amp for Windows, Mac, Linux, and the PS4. Offering a 2496 DAC, a mic input, and a full watt of power at 32 ohms in a single unit, the Arc can power even your most challenging headphones. It's driverless, handmade here in the US, carries a 10-year warranty, and right now through July 31st, you can use code BadSeed Tech to save 5% off your purchase. Check out the Arc at MayflowerElectronics.com. Yo, I'm Brian P. You're watching BadSeed Tech, and today we're taking a look at the Blademaster Pro wireless TKL gaming keyboard from Drevo. For transparency, Drevo did send this unit out for review, but as you should know by now, doesn't affect my review in any way. So the Blademaster Pro makes a pretty solid first impression. It's heavy, nice strong colorway in the space gray with black keycaps, gunmetal accents, unique architecture choices on the corners, diffused RGB light strip that runs all the way around the unit. We also have this genius knob, which is like a multi-function actuated scroll wheel located on the left side of the board. We have a recessed center-mounted USB-C connector. There's no routing channel here, so this is set up to use a custom cable if you want. Along the front, we also have the Drevo type logo. It's a really clean presentation. It's kind of a toss-up for me whether it would bother me more being centered across the entire front of the board or centered on the spacebar. They chose the latter. I'm okay with it. Underneath, we have 5 rubber pads to keep it in place and single height adjustment feet that are rubber tipped as well. Combine that with the weight of this board, it's not going anywhere. Really clean font here. Not too cluttered with alternate legends. RGB is mostly consistent, but the lower edge of the characters hovers over the stem itself, so every main character is slightly darker at the bottom. And that's when I noticed we have single shot ABS keycaps here. Yikes. These are not great. Really thin sidewalls, definite candidate for a replacement set of keycaps, and a really odd place to cut corners on a board that looks this nice. This version of this board, the Pro, comes in 6 different flavors of Cherry MX. These happen to be red silence. Now, say what you want about Cherry MX switches. I know people have their preference, but these are widely regarded as the high watermark for quality among consumer boards. You can also get this keyboard in a ton of different layouts depending on where you're located. Included in the box is a keycap puller, a cleaning brush. That's a nice touch. I like this. The small wireless 2.4 gigahertz dongle and the cable, which is thin, rubberized, and has a right angle USB-C connection. So right out of the box, I plug this keyboard in and I get RGB lighting, but no output from the keyboard whatsoever. Turns out, before you can use this for the first time, you actually have to select wired mode. It doesn't come that way by default, and because it's not really obvious how to do this, it makes it the first keyboard where I've ever had to consult the manual before I could actually start typing. Wired mode worked great, Bluetooth was able to connect, but I started running into trouble when I went for the 2.4 gigahertz mode. It just wouldn't work. The board powered on okay, my system saw the dongle, it went into pairing mode, but it never synced up, so no output. So next stop was to support to download the firmware updater. Downloading and updating the firmware on the keyboard itself was pretty straightforward. Then you reset the keyboard. Then I had to go through the process of updating the firmware on the dongle itself, which was a little less straightforward, and reset the keyboard. And nothing. Decided I should download the Drevo Power Console software. Nothing. And here's a fun one. Turns out the software uses a cloud system, so you can recall your settings from anywhere you happen to be. You can use this in offline mode, but in order to start the software for the first time, you have to create an account that's linked to an email. Now, you probably know that I'm not a huge fan of peripheral software in general, but I understand that it's a necessary evil sometimes for functionality. But the idea of strong-arming an account setup before you can even use the software is trash, in my opinion. It should be revised and removed. Worse yet, the rep from Drevo actually told me in an email that the reason why they do this is so they can harvest user data in an effort to continually improve the software. And you can't use the software without agreeing to terms. Nah, nope. So running in Bluetooth mode was decent. I've got an antenna on the back of my computer that handles Bluetooth. It sits less than 3 feet away from this keyboard, and over the course of typing this script, which took about 2 to 3 hours to do, I had 2 issues. One where the keyboard just locked up and just continually started outputting A's into the middle of the script, and the other one where it disconnected completely and had to be reset before I could get functionality. I got really good at resetting this keyboard throughout this review. So Bluetooth for me would do in a pinch, nothing serious, no competitive gaming. When the keyboard does type, it sounds like this. stabilizers here are not bad. It's hard for me to grade stabs now because after you feel really good ones, everything else feels suspect. But these are solid enough that the average consumer isn't going to worry about modding or replacing these. They're not going to cut it if you're a keyboard enthusiast. All right, let's grab this knob. See, I bet you thought I wasn't, but then I did. Surprise. The Genius knob is actually a really solid idea, and it takes input and forward scroll, back scroll, single click, and double click. This can be assigned to all sorts of functions. Anything, really, and you can have like 3 different layers plus all the base functions that control common stuff like lighting, brightness, media controls, etc. As a note here, you do only get access to 1 layer of functions versus the 3 available if you're operating this keyboard in either of the wireless modes. The only downside of the knob really is its mechanical implementation. It has a little play to it that just doesn't feel solid, and it should really be textured. Like the feel of your finger sliding over it has a similar feeling to the knob spinning. Now would probably be a good time to mention that the software has a crazy amount of depth in terms of key remapping. It's pretty much anything goes, and the software makes it easy. Plus it has macros, sleep time adjustment for all modes, 3 assignable profiles that can be saved to the keyboard. These can also be tied to an individual application or game, so they will auto-load on game launch as well. This works okay. It's buggy. It actually crashed on me more than a few times during testing. This is obviously also where you're going to go to get into all your RGB stuff. You can select a variety of effects here, and they also have a secondary layer that sits on top of whatever effect you have selected. And again, of course, you can use this software in offline mode, but only after you've set up an account initially. Powering on the unit without a cable is done with the 4th dip switch on the underside of the unit. Dip 1 will exchange the positions of caps in the left control. Dip 2 is for Mac mode, and Dip 3 is for Dvorak layout. They say battery life here is still rated at 20 hours with all the lights on, which sounds pretty impressive, or 60 plus hours with all the lighting disabled. It defaults to about 50% brightness when in wireless mode, so I'm not 100% sure how brightness of the LED affects battery life, but you can still set it to full bright manually. Interestingly enough, while in wireless mode, you can't enter the software settings. The light bar is a nice effect. It looks pretty good. It's diffused well. It's still pretty obvious though where the LEDs are. My copy has this weird little black spot behind the light bar on the left front side as well. So for me, the Pro version of this keyboard in its current state is a pretty tough recommend. I spent an overwhelming amount of time trying to get the 2.4 gigahertz mode to function correctly. I read the manual. I did the firmware update. I watched the tutorial video. Nothing. After contacting the rep, I was able to piece together that what you actually want to do here is avoid the keyboard updater in the firmware updater program. When you use that, it updates the firmware in the keyboard to a version that does not match with the wireless dongle and prevents the wireless updater from seeing the keyboard. Under the wireless updater, you have to update the wireless dongle in the top section to the most current firmware. Then in the lower section where it says device, which is actually unlabeled until the correct firmware is installed, you have to update the firmware down there as well to get both versions to match up. To say that this entire process is not straightforward or intuitive would be a ridiculous understatement. Now, in fairness, after all that, the wireless mode actually works really well. I was able to type and game on it just fine. I didn't have any issues or any interference with any of my Logitech wireless mice. No connectivity issues, no lag issues, and it never came unpaired by itself. But by the time I got there, I was already so frustrated with this product that I was totally over it. If this is the end user experience right now as it exists, I'll pass. This entire process needs to be revised. So at $130 US in its current state, this is going to be a miss for me. The Blademaster TE, which is a wired version, no wireless at all, and comes with Gateron switches instead of Cherry, retails for like 80 bucks, is a better value to me. But the keycaps aren't up to speed with the rest of the build. They'll need replacing. And the software, while crazy functional, is not stable or consistent or non-invasive enough to get a nod from me. This feels like a pre-release or a prototype. A promising prototype, but it still needs a few more revisions and some tighter attention to quality control before I can give it a recommendation. There's not a lot of user information about this board out there either. The only thing I found on it was one Reddit thread that was not very promising at all. So I really want to hear from you guys on this one. Have you been considering this board? Do you own it? If you own it, what has your experience been like? Any questions over anything I covered? Hit me in the comments or drop by the Discord. And that's it for this time. I'm Brian P. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button, hit that sub button. And until next time, stay up. Oh, good, you're still here. Look, I just wanted to take a minute to address this review today and some of the recent reviews on the channel because we've had some rough ones recently. Now, I want you to know I take no pleasure in this whatsoever. I don't like doing negative reviews. I don't really like being around negative things. in general. There are times when I have opted to simply return a product back to a company because financially it didn't fit the marketplace. It wasn't going to be a strong enough product to where I had to worry about people buying it. I will only do a negative review in one of two circumstances. Number one, I feel like a lot of people are behind it. There's some positive reviews out there, and there's a very strong chance that somebody will purchase that product and they haven't got the review that they should hear before they get it. And number two, I'll do it if it's a situation where a product is just terribly misrepresented. Like it just does not at all hold up to what it's supposed to be. In the interest of today's video, it's one of those situations where I feel like if I had gone out and bought that with my own money or ordered that, or even worse, been a part of the Kickstarter, and that's what I had got, I would have buyer's remorse big time. And that ultimately is my goal, is to just make sure that you guys end up spending your money on stuff that you can be happy with. So I don't enjoy doing negative reviews, but I feel like it's a necessary part of what we're doing here. Let me know in the comments how you feel about that. Or even better, stop by the Discord and tag me. I don't hang out in there enough. I really should get better about it. But I appreciate you guys being here, and I appreciate you watching as always. Until next time, stay up.